Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy. So where and when are we?
Our official win is my favorite decade, the 70s.
It's because there's so many options to choose from.
It's because there were no real repercussions for anything, so it was just wide open. Anyway, our where is across 7 United States. I'm going to tell you the story a little bit different.
Oh, no.
Oh, shush. It's going to be like one of them movies where it starts with...
I hate those.
Well, just understand it. Get your brain hole ready, okay?
What do you have against normal storytelling?
So the legitimate problem that I found with this case is it goes from the 70s to current, but what happened currently, like from the 80s to 2024, is more prominent when you look this guy up. So it made it to where there were no details on the things that he did in the 70s. And I know how everybody likes our details. So I don't want to just graze over the fact that he is a murderer, but...
That was the whole point of the story.
It is the point, but I'm going to give you the details of what's current. Then we're going to rewind back in time to tell you how we got to that point and then continue going forward.
Oh, no.
Kind of like one of our favorite movies, Fried Green Tomatoes, because we just watched that last night. Jason's never seen it. But how it starts with them pulling the truck out of the river, and then the old lady's like, really, to understand Iggy, you got to start back with her brother Buddy. And they rewind back. It starts with you telling.
But it's not current.
The way she told the story. Same idea. So just shush, okay? So our who is Thomas Eugene Creech. He would eventually be convicted of 5 murders, linked to 7 other murders, and eventually confess to a total of 42 murders. He allegedly was involved in the Church of Satan and Hell's Angels.
I didn't even know they had a church.
Now, the part I'm going to start with, he's already in prison for murder, okay? Now, less than 2 years after being put in prison, it's 1981, and Thomas at this point was 47 years old when he was attacked by a fellow prisoner. The fellow prisoner's name was David Jensen. David was in prison for car theft. He was only 23 years old, but David was partially disabled. Several years earlier...
What was his disability?
Several years earlier, he attempted suicide, and David had shot himself in the head, which resulted in the removal of part of his brain and a plastic plate being placed in his skull, causing impaired speech and delayed motor functions.
So you were just ignoring my question because you were going to get to it?
I was in the process of answering it. Yes, I am.
I see.
Thomas, our fellow we're talking about, and David did not like each other. Their main beef was that Thomas was sick and tired of cleaning up behind David. Since Thomas was a janitor in the prison, he was forced to clean up whatever mess was made by his fellow inmates, which, ew, can I just say?
That doesn't seem like a privilege. That seems like salt in the wound of he's already being punished. Was that a voluntary position?
So I guess it gives them access to other privileges that they don't typically get. Like they get more time out of their cell.
To clean!
Having to clean up after my family, I would willingly sit in a cell quietly.
I'm not cleaning up anybody else's crumb sprinkles.
Let's face it, there's probably some jizz spray, some turds, like who knows what else, but I don't feel like these fellers are clean.
I'm telling you, it's not thoroughly scrubbed neither.
No, it's just smeared.
Disgusting. Everything's sticky.
Those floors weren't brown.
You've got problems.
Not me. He's got the problems because he's the one cleaning it up.
Well, so is this feller just particularly disgusting, or was he doing antics like he just mopped the floor and this guy walked across it and left footy prints?
So I think it's just a combination of lots of things. Like apparently David would drop trash. And I don't know if it was along the lines of like, hey, he dropped trash and then points at Thomas and was like,
you clean it up?
Yeah. So I don't know if it was on that level. It doesn't go into detail. It was just, they argue because Thomas cleans, David makes a mess. He knows it's David making the mess. So part of me thinks that there was a little bit of antagonistic behavior going on.
Being a dick. But can I just say, just because someone else could clean it up doesn't mean that you should leave some shit for someone else to do.
So you're talking like a normal person. These here are maximum security prisoners that I feel like,
I was just talking to everybody.
in the grand scheme of life, these fellers don't give two shits about nothing.
I wasn't talking to them. They're already bad. I'm
Yeah.
just saying for everybody else out there, just because you can leave something for somebody else doesn't mean you should. Be a good human being. Pick up your garbage.
Yeah. Anyway, so on May 13th, 1981, the constant disdain for one another finally came to a head after the pair ended up bickering over the television in the common area.
He's supposed to be cleaning, not watching his stories.
He's not meant to clean 24/7.
You said he got freedom to do the cleaning. Which, by the way, that's just an oxymoron. Free to go about to clean.
Right, but I'm just saying he's not cleaning his every waking moment. Apparently during his downtime, they were watching TV and they argued over what was on the television.
What was on the television?
Anyway, I'm going to ignore your stupidness. When it was David's turn to be released for an hour from his cell to go work out and shower, he had other nefarious intentions. David attacked Thomas with a sock filled with batteries.
Hey, where'd he get all the batteries?
I have no idea, but they were 5D cell batteries, so they were the big batteries.
Oh, I was going to say, he was collecting them at all the remotes.
During the assault, Thomas managed to get the upper hand and was able to grab the battery-filled sock away from David. David was like, "Ah, shit," and retreated from his attack on Thomas and ran back to his cell. But he didn't just run back to get away from Thomas, who now had his weapon. No, he went back to his cell to retrieve a toothbrush that he had taped a razor blade to. And then David returned and attempted to attack Thomas again. As David lunged at Thomas, Thomas swung the battery-filled sock at David and managed to knock him right between the eyes, knocking David to the ground. Right. I did chuckle at that one because, dude, you're 23. You attack a 47-year-old man. He manages to take away your sock-wielding your weapon that you're wielding, end up running away, going to get another weapon, and coming back, and you get walloped in the face with your own weapon. Like, come on, man.
Was it a dirty sock or a crusty one?
I'm going to say dirty because it's prison, so whatever. According to Thomas, David was still flailing his razor-bladed toothbrush at him, so Thomas swung the sock at David again. Now, mind you, David's on the ground.
The youngin'.
Mm-hmm. And the plastic plate I told you about from when he tried to commit suicide that was in David's skull, it shattered and blood just splattered out everywhere.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, it was a horrific crime scene.
Is he, I assume, unconscious for this, or he's still fighting?
It's hard to say, but it appears that strike is what made him unconscious at that point. Now, David was completely out for the count.
Hey, where the hell are the officers?
So I think because everybody was on lockdown and it was just Thomas because he was cleaning and the one other prisoner.
It's still a prison!
Right, but I don't think that, you know what? I don't know. Even though David's down on the ground and unconscious, Thomas continued to beat the shit out of David.
Because I feel like this should be real noisy and somebody should be like, huh, it sounds like somebody just got hit with a bag full of batteries. That was weird.
I don't think prison is like nap time with a toddler, and I don't think because everybody's locked in their cell, it's quiet.
But I feel like if no one else is in there, I feel like there had to have been some sort of screams, or if you saw somebody run by and then run back the direction they originally came from, it might look a little suspicious.
Well, he was allowed to be out of his cell, so he's allowed to go back and forth however he feels
But
necessary.
he was running. It's not the gym. I feel like that should have been suspicious.
He only has an hour to get done his things. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But anyway.
There's no checkpoints.
Claire.
What?
Thomas continued the brutal assault and began kicking David in the throat and in his already bloodied, shattered skull. And for your issue that you had with the guards, it wasn't until a little bit later, I'm not sure how much time went by, but eventually David's battered body was discovered by a guard.
The next morning.
And then he was rushed to the hospital. He was still alive, but...
barely.
Yeah.
No, so I feel like when they do that, I feel like it's a case of there's no one there to call time of death, so they're like, he's still alive. Sure he is. Mm-hmm.
Or it was along the lines of, because there's nobody there to call a time of death, they have to do CPR and life-saving measures, and then a doctor at the hospital calls it. But either way, David died because of the beating that he endured. However, I don't feel too sorry for him because
He started it with the batteries.
Yeah.
Dave would call that fuck around and find out.
I agree. Now, Thomas was already serving multiple life sentences for murders. And then once again, he's charged with the murder of David Jensen because he just killed somebody else. And Thomas's response to being charged with David's murder was, yes, I killed that guy, but he attacked me.
Why do you always pick fellers that sound real whiny?
Because they're murderers, and it's funny to make them sound like whiny little bitches. Anyway, Thomas tried to claim self-defense, but the prosecution argued that he went above and beyond self-defense.
He did. Once he was no longer a threat, the beating should have stopped.
It definitely should have. And Thomas recalled the brutal encounter with a statement in court. And okay, I kicked him a couple more times, and he was laying there bleeding.
Hold up.
Bleeding real bad and breathing real funny.
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. You're going to have to reread that not in our mom's voice.
Shush.
You can't reuse that.
It's for the crazy people. I can use
Andrea!
I'm not taking that out either. Anyway, after realizing his self-defense claims were going to get him absolutely nowhere, Thomas pled guilty to murder.
He's already in jail.
Yeah. He's serving multiple life sentences. What has he got to lose, right? During Thomas's sentencing, the judge did recognize that Thomas did not instigate the fight. The judge also pointed out that Thomas did not chase after David when David retreated for another weapon. The judge also acknowledged that initially, Thomas was in fact defending himself. However, he said, you intentionally destroyed another human being at a time when he was completely helpless.
Yeah, but at the same time, the fact that he went to get another weapon, I think that feller was real pissed that he got even hit with a bag of, or a sock full of batteries, and when he snatched that thing and then the sumbitch came back with a number 2, now it was on.
He came back with a number 2.
You're an infant.
And the judge also pointed out that the murder was extremely gruesome and evident of excessive violent rage.
Yeah, he was pissed. He probably missed whatever he was trying to watch. Because this was before you could pause it. He'd already missed some of his stories because of all the arguing.
You don't listen at all, lady.
What?
They had argued earlier in the day about the TV.
Right.
But at the point in which they got into a fight...
But he'd already missed his story. Salt in the wound. Insult to injury.
Anyway, the
Maybe he missed the cliffhanger, and then it was at dinner when everybody else is talking about whatever he missed. I don't know. I haven't been to prison.
The violence went well beyond self-defense, and in 1982, once again, Thomas was convicted of yet another murder and sentenced to death this time.
Oh. Yeah, so I'm pretty sure there's, at some point, the law was passed that if you're already in there for some other shit and you kill an inmate, it's a more serious crime.
Yeah.
But it's kind of like when they're already in the commission of a felony and somebody dies, it makes it a capital offense.
Yeah. Now, he's already in prison for those life sentences, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they're not in a rush to give him any other...
Yeah, he's not going anywhere.
Right. So to do his actual sentencing, that was in 1995, and the prosecutor was like, if the death penalty doesn't fit this defendant, who does it fit? This defendant is a mass murderer.
No, what year did... Shut up! What year did the sock battle start?
1981.
And it was 95 when they actually brought it to trial?
No, it was 82. But when they went for his sentencing, that was in 95.
That is a long gap, though.
Yeah, but he's not going anywhere. And let's face it, even if he gets the death penalty, which he did, the amount of time he's going to sit there and rot in prison on death row is going to still be fucking forever. So who cares?
Because it means the longer it goes without trying to put him to death.
I feel like they were dealing with all the people that were on the loose that had to be tried. And since
that's because they let him back out.
It's the 80s. They're trying to clean up the mess. He's already incarcerated.
Okay.
He's not going anywhere. But anyway, in 1995, the prosecutor was saying, this defendant is a mass murderer. He's shown extreme violence while in the penitentiary. If the legislature didn't intend to fit this defendant, who could it fit any better? Which is along the lines of what you're saying of, he's in prison for something he's already done that was horrific. And here he is still committing horrific crimes. Just put him to death.
I think at this point it's the post 70s, and now that they start actually catching these fellers, they're overcrowded. So we got to get to this.
Yeah. Well, aside from being a piece of shit, Thomas's claim to fame is also being Idaho's longest serving death row inmate in the state.
Congratulations, Idaho. You don't know how to finish a job.
A little bit about this feller now. So we're going to rewind back.
My favorite.
Thomas Eugene Creech was born September 5th, 1950.
Holy shit, how far back you want to go?
In 1950 in Hamilton, Ohio. His parents fought with each other quite frequently, and eventually they would divorce. Thomas would live with his father full-time, which I found surprising that in the 50s or 60s that the dad had custody of the son.
Maybe his mom was a prostitute.
That's, of course, your go-to. I'm not surprised.
No, back in those times, that's when they would be like, she was a prostitute, even if she wasn't.
That was usually their claim to not take the children. It's not mine. She's a whore.
No, like, she's a bad mom.
Anyway, when Thomas was 16 years old, he was pleading with a male nurse to get help for his father. The nurse ignored the teen's cry for help, and at just 16 years old, Thomas held his father in his arms as he died from an unknown cause.
Why was he in the hospital?
I don't know.
Just because he was sick?
He was having something was going on. They ended up trying to get him help.
Yeah, they waited too long before getting help.
And then it fell on deaf ears when they were there. Like, there's other people here are more sick. Apparently not, though.
Well, how is he more sick? Because he's dead. I would say somebody fucked up that triage situation. Unless he kind of ran in and it's like they don't even have time to do anything.
Well, it says that the nurse ignored him, so.
Maybe because they're used to dealing. You know what, though? I think it's hard being a nurse because you get compassion fatigue.
Well, and you also get pulled every which way. And if you're already doing something else, it's like,
And I feel like it's not abnormal for youngins to look like they're
overreacting.
Panicking, yeah.
Well, Thomas would attack the nurse who was supposed to be taking care of his father. Thomas's teen years from that point forward would become nothing but tragedy after tragedy. His girlfriend at the time would die in a traffic accident.
What?
Yeah. And Thomas would blame his friend for the accident.
Did he run her over?
I think he was driving recklessly, resulted in a car accident, and the girlfriend died.
Oh.
And Thomas decided his friend needed to be held accountable.
Uh-oh.
So, being both judge and jury for his friend, Thomas sentenced his irresponsible friend to death.
So he's also the executioner?
Yep. And at just 17 years old, Thomas committed his first murder and drowned his pal.
He really liked that gal.
At this point, Thomas runs away and becomes a drifter throughout the late 60s.
He picked a good time.
For the rest of his life, he becomes a drifter until he goes to prison. He traveled across the country hitchhiking, and on December 11th, 1969, Thomas was sentenced to 2 to 50 years in prison, which I thought that was a wild range, for unarmed robbery. Seeing that his prison sentence would branch into the 70s, I found it unsurprising that Thomas was paroled in 1971.
Yeah.
Just 2 years later, when Thomas was 23 years old, so it's 1973, he would get married to 17-year-old Thomasine Lauren.
I thought you were about to say Bobbitt.
No, Thomasine Lauren White. Thomasine was from Boise, Idaho. On August 23rd, 1973, Thomas broke the conditions of their parole that he got for that unarmed robbery when he allegedly stole 13 cartons of cigarettes. That's a lot of cigarettes.
He's probably going to resell them.
So he had learned a little bit when they locked him up for violating his parole. He just acted like a whack job. I don't know what all he was doing to be considered a whack job, maybe talking to himself. I have no clue, but they said he acted crazy. So rather than keep him in jail, they sent him to a psych hospital to be evaluated.
Maybe it wasn't an act.
It was. His criminal charges were dropped, and after a week in the hospital, he was released on a weekend pass from the psychiatric hospital, which seems like a wildly terrible idea, but it's the 70s.
He just needs a vacation from this life.
Like, just
take you a stroll somewhere. They were just really hoping that he wouldn't come back.
Well, they got their wish, because like all other criminals we've discussed, Thomas didn't learn his lesson and didn't seem fazed by his narrow escape from receiving additional prison time. So it was time for him to try again.
You know, I'm still stuck on, what the fuck is a weekend pass for you're committed?
I have no idea. When I read that, I was
It's like the seatbelt light came off on an airplane. You're free to move about the country.
I think he wasn't free to move about the country. It was free to stay in the area. But Thomasine and Thomas decided to take his weekend pass and run off, and they went and got in some trouble together. On October 23rd, 1973, Thomas and Thomasine attempted to rob a 70-year-old retiree named Paul Schrader. Paul didn't go down without putting up a fight. Unfortunately, he was stabbed to death at the Downtown Motor Hotel in Tucson, Arizona.
He was how old?
70.
Dang.
Yeah.
He works out.
Witnesses put the pair in the area at the time of Paul's murder, as well as the couple were using Paul's credit cards to get out of the area.
Oy.
Yeah. So together they traveled from Arizona to Oregon, and they were charging crap on Paul's cards, and a warrant was issued for both Thomas and Thomasine for that murder. The couple would eventually find themselves in Utah, and Thomas began working as a cook in the El Bambi Cafe in Beaver, Utah. Go ahead, process it all. I said Beaver.
I can't. El Bambi.
El Bambi and Beaver.
Oh, do they store or do they serve deer? Because that's real fucked up. El Bambi.
That would be really messed up. Yes, that. I didn't look up their menu.
You said it's a bar?
No.
A grill?
I said he was working as a cook in the El Bambi Cafe.
Where they also serve El Beaver?
No.
You don't know?
I don't know. But anyway.
Clam chowder then?
Anyway, Thomas ended up getting trashed and was arrested for disorderly conduct. The police in Utah learned of Thomas and Thomasine's warrants for the murder of Paul Schrader in Arizona. The couple were both arrested in Utah for that murder and then taken back to Arizona to face the charges that were against them. After just a few hours of deliberation, 23-year-old Thomas and his now 18-year-old bride were acquitted of the murder charges and let go. So I feel like because they just found him with the credit cards.
Yeah, they don't have anything else.
Yeah, and this is prior to being able to have DNA evidence.
DNA, yeah.
They couldn't make it stick, but the police knew it was them. In 1974, Thomas and Thomasine would then move to Portland, Oregon, where they moved into the St. Mark's Episcopal Church in Portland. He began working as the church's resident maintenance worker. Also in 94, Thomasine was gang raped by 11 men.
Oh, who was counting?
That wasn't the question I asked, but whatever.
Oh, I feel like after 2, it's like...
Not funny. Get it out.
No, I was just... I never said it was funny.
Uh-huh. Anyway.
What happened that, like...
I don't know. So Thomasine suffered both physical and mental injuries after the assault on her. She was left partially paralyzed because after these 11 men gang raped her, they threw her from a 4th-story window.
Holy shit, they threw her from a...
Yeah, this poor lady.
What's with you in cases of people getting chunked off really high spots?
What other case did I do that with?
That chick that got her arms chopped off after she was raped and hit over the head with a hammer or something and then chunked over a bridge and then crawled and then walked several miles.
Yeah, that was Mary Vincent.
I thought it was a Singletary lady.
No, that's Larry Singleton was the guy that attacked her. Her name's Mary Vincent, and we named that case the Mad Chopper. That's season 1. It's one of our earlier.
Well, I'm just saying, you got some weird things. Well, there was another one where somebody crawled out of a swamp.
What?
I don't know.
What?
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't either.
There were alligators.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was an Australia case. There were crocodiles.
Mm-hmm. Whatever. Things that go chomp in the night.
Anyway, so Thomasine, after this horrifying event, she would eventually make the tragic decision to commit suicide while in the Oregon State Hospital, and Thomas vowed to exact his revenge on the 11 men who assaulted his wife.
I can get behind that.
Same.
Chop their penises off and let them slowly bleed to death in a swamp.
However, a few months after the death of his wife, Thomas began dating a 17-year-old child named Carol Spaulding. So...
he recovered quickly, asshole.
I feel like he needed a snack and didn't know how to cook.
He wasn't real committed to his cause.
Well...
hey, are these the people he murders? Because so far I'm not feeling bad for them.
So right now he's already committed 1 murder, which would be the 70-year-old guy. And I don't feel like that was deserved at all.
No.
So now he's dating Carol Spaulding, right? Thomas then quits his job at the church, and him and Carol move, and they took everything with them except one thing. Male human remains were found in his living room.
Well, why would you pack that? It's dead weight.
That's sick. I have issues. By the time the remains were discovered, Thomas and his girlfriend Carol, they'd moved to Idaho together. Supposedly the same year, on November 6, 1974, Thomas and Carol were hitchhiking when two traveling painters stopped to give the pair a ride. The two men that stopped were 34-year-old Edward Arnold and 40-year-old John Wayne Bradford. They picked them up in their 1956 Buick Century. Thomas, somewhere along the way, pulled out a rifle, which I don't know where he had that stored, that when they picked him up, because I can tell you, I would never pick up a hitchhiker that's just traveling with a rifle. Just wouldn't do it.
Well, maybe he'd been to prison.
Who?
Whoever's traveling with the easily not confined, easily concealed rifle.
You saying he put it in his ass?
You don't know.
Anyway.
You seen those fellas that swallow the sword? They go somewhere.
Anyway, Thomas, somewhere along the way, pulled out that rifle and shot both men in the head. Carol and Thomas then partially buried the bodies off of Highway 55 in Donley.
Or is it partially buried because they realized digging a hole is a lot harder work than they thought?
Probably. And we've already seen that he's not so committed to the cause.
Which, by the way, if I ever keel over quickly after a tragic event in my life, I'm going to hope my husband takes a lot longer to get hitched again.
I'm without words.
What?
I don't have any words.
She keeled over, and then a couple months later, he's got another side piece.
He needed a sidekick for his crimes and somebody that could do the food-ins.
She don't have experience.
You don't know?
She's a baby.
It's the 70s. I feel like the girls were taught at a very young age to do the cooking and the cleaning.
That's not the experience I was talking about.
He got to break her in.
Ugh.
So anyway, the bodies of John and Edward,
the painters,
yes, and their blood-splattered Buick were found later the following day. Meanwhile, Thomas made him a quick friend. This new feller's name is Gene Alvin Hilby. Gene was only 26. Unaware that the rifle was just used as a murder weapon, Gene agreed to bury it.
What?
Yeah. And I didn't know it needed to be said aloud for the folks, but if somebody asks you to bury anything like a knife, a gun, a bat,
a body,
anything that's not like...
anything that's not a bulb or a tree or a tulip.
Yes.
But it's not normal to be asked to bury or hide or conceal a weapon of any sort for someone else.
Yes, do not do it. Just say no. A mere 2 days after the killing of the Good Samaritans, Thomas and Carol supposedly sent death threats to the new Colorado senator. When I read that, I was like, they're not even in.
But why are they sending death threats?
That put them on police radar from these supposed threats, and Thomas's name pops up as a possible suspect in the 2 Idaho murders. So I was just like, this doesn't even make sense to me, but that's how they connected these dots to Thomas and Carol. And then the police saw they wanted to talk to him about that body they found in his living room at the church.
Yeah, I'd imagine.
So the police go and pick them up.
They figured out a free way to travel.
Sure did. Technically, they weren't paying for it. They were robbing people and using their stuff. And hitchhiking. A side note, Thomas was cleared of making any death threats. So I feel like that's the minor of all the things because they were still arraigned on murder charges. A week after being arrested, Thomas took a piece of broken mirror and sliced both of his wrists. However, the prison guards quickly restrained Thomas, got him the medical help he needed. He survives. Now, that friend Gene who buried the rifle, he was also arrested for participating in the murder of the man found in the living room.
Because he hid the evidence?
Well, he was arrested because the police were just like, if you associate with this feller, you had to be involved. He was charged with participating in the murder of the man found in Thomas's living room at the church. And Gene would eventually take a plea deal and was released on probation because they really had nothing on him. He just pled guilty to hindering a murder case because he hid the rifle.
Idiot.
Right. Now, Thomas's little girlfriend, Carol, she's only a baby. She's freaking 18. And by the way, she's also pregnant. She was tried as an adult for 2 counts of first-degree murder for Edward and John. the fellows who picked him up while they were hitchhiking. Now, while awaiting his trial for one of the many murders that Thomas was accused of committing, he also continued to cause trouble while in the jail. They ended up having to move him 90 miles south to a more secure Idaho prison. On June 16th, 1975, Thomas attacked his cellmate, William Fisher. Now, there's a gag order placed on that case. Not sure why, but the only thing I could find was that William did have to be transported and treated for severe facial injuries. I'm not sure what happened. Meanwhile, Idaho's women's prison was overcrowded, so many of the women were sent to a Nevada prison, which is where Carol would give birth to her and Thomas's son on June 30th, 1975. She named their son Benjamin Allen Spaulding. Shortly after giving birth, she was forced to give her infant up to the state to put him into foster care while she served her 2-year sentence for her part in the murders, as long as she testified against Thomas. I feel like her giving birth, she wanted her baby back eventually. She's lucky that it was in the 70s, because at that point, women couldn't think for themselves. So they were like, she was tricked. A month after the assault on his cellmate, and he was transferred, to the other prison. In August, supposedly Thomas fell off his top bunk in his cell.
Humpty Dumpty was pushed.
And he had to be transported to the hospital for stitches to his head.
How far back did he roll? He got launched off his bed. Is this a case of they were battling for who got top bunk?
I don't know. A few years later, in 1981, that's when David Jensen attacked Thomas, and Thomas murdered him. That's what we already talked about in the beginning. And Thomas would cause shockwaves throughout the U.S. when he would go on to confess to 42 other murders. He claimed to have joined the Hells Angels and committed 5 contract killings. And here's my thing, okay?
Oh, hold up. Were the painters 2 of them? Because I was curious how that one was going to go. Did they paint houses?
I don't know. But I'm also curious if he committed some of these murders against like a rival gang type situation, and those men reacted by raping Thomasine, his first wife.
Like Sons of Anarchy style.
Yeah. Then Thomas claims to have also joined Satanic Church, where he was involved in human sacrifice rituals.
Well, we took a hard right, huh?
Yeah. So he also rattled off confessions for murders that were committed in Washington State, California, Utah, Oklahoma, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, and Kansas. He did send police on wild goose chases for mass burial sites where police would just find cow bones. Police further investigated his satanic rituals, and they jotted down the satanic rites that he said they would say. One of the officers realized that Thomas was reciting something word for word that he had read in a Playboy.
The what?
Yeah.
He was really deep in those articles. It was for study.
What the hell was Playboy writing that could have been confused with satanic rites? You know what I mean? Like, it just didn't make sense to me, but whatever.
So now he has an excuse to get his Playboys.
Right?
It's for research. And he was studying up. He memorized it too.
Does he get paid because he did that on his off time?
It's overtime.
Yeah, overtime.
He was putting in the work.
Yeah, he was. He was truly committed, hand over fist.
You are sick. With him traveling around the country doing all of his murderings, did no one suggest that he just collect spoons instead?
I guess not. Even with Thomas messing with the police, they were able to connect him to 9 murders. Gordon Lee Stanton and Charles Thomas Miller, they were both murdered in Las Vegas, Nevada. William Joseph Dean, he was the 22-year-old man that they found in Thomas's living room in Portland, Oregon. Sandra Jane Ramsmog, she was a 22-year-old store clerk, and she was found shortly after William Dean's body was found. So it's kind of like he was taken off out of the area, and in the process, she got in the way. 22-year-old Stuart McKenzie was killed in Wyoming. Vivian Grant, she was 50. She was murdered in Sacramento, California. Paul Schrader, he was the 70-year-old retiree that Thomas robbed and stabbed to death in Arizona. 34-year-old Thomas Arnold and 40-year-old John Wayne Bradford, those were the house painters that he shot in the car. And the judge in the case of the 2 murdered house painters said that Thomas denied killing the 2 men in the Idaho court, but admitted to being a mass murderer. Thomas told the court, "My goodness, I'm admitting I killed all these other people. I wouldn't deny it if I had done it. To further try to prove his point, he then took investigators out to a large mine shaft in California where they did in fact find a lot of skeletal remains. The bodies of 11 victims who were either shot, stabbed, beaten, or strangled to death have been recovered.
That's a real weird way to prove a point.
Right? Even with all that and the discovery of the other victims, Thomas was convicted for killing John and Edward. Idaho's law stated at the time that first-degree murder charges, you received a mandatory death sentence.
Good. Bring that back.
Well, Thomas was sentenced to be hanged. Thomas eventually would admit, because at this point he was found guilty, he would then turn around and say, yeah, I did kill John and Edward. Except he would claim that they pulled a knife on him and Carol and threatened to rape Carol, and that's why he shot them. He tried to claim it was self-defense. Again, he really wanted to use that as a claim.
The self-defense thing, this is after he tried to do the self-defense the first round?
No, this would have been first.
The first?
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, you would think he'd have figured out, whichever one came first, that they're not buying his self-defense thing when he gets all crazy murdery and then covers it up, too.
Well, Idaho law, by the way, where it was mandatory death penalty for a first-degree murder conviction, was later ruled unconstitutional by the Idaho Supreme Court in 1979, and Thomas's death sentence was reduced to life in prison. So that would have been his serving multiple life sentences.
That makes sense.
Yeah. The reduction in Thomas's sentencing did not sit well with the sheriff that did the investigating or the prosecutor that tried the case.
I'm kind of curious. Is this like a weird way that there was a hit put out on him then, that they turned the other way when the feller attacked him? They just didn't expect the older guy to live?
Maybe. Well, the prosecutor and the sheriff go on to tell the warden that Thomas was psychotic, he doesn't like his fellow inmates, and that he would probably kill someone again if the guards did not keep a close eye on him.
And they didn't.
And surprise, surprise, what's a more intelligent idea than keeping a close tabs on an admitted serial killer? How about let's instead give Thomas a trustee status and give him a full run of several sections of the maximum security prison as a janitor?
Makes sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And 2 years after giving that trustee status is when the fight between David and Thomas took place, ultimately leading to David's brutal death in May of 1981.
Sounds like a setup to me.
A year later is 1982. That's when he was convicted of the murder of David, and Thomas was sentenced in 1995 to be executed. Now, on June 14th, 1999, so 4 years after being sentenced to death again, the federal district court granted a stay of execution, and as of November 1st, 2019, that's a long ass time, go from 99 to 2019, no execution date was set for Thomas until it was. Thomas Eugene Creech was eventually given the date of February 28th, 2024, when he would be given lethal injection for his crimes. On Tuesday, February 27th, so the day before he was supposed to be executed, Thomas and his wife, which I was like, what? He has a wife?
He sure doesn't have a hard time finding the ladies.
I was like, what the heck? And that made me look up how he got married to who, because I thought maybe him and Carol got married at some point, and I missed that. But no, several years prior to him being given his execution date, Thomas married the mother of one of the correctional officers in the prison. I was like, wait, what?
Hey, Mom, I got a real nice feller for you to meet. You're going to have to come during visiting hours, though.
It made no sense to me. Like, what? Anyway, he spent time with her, and Thomas ate his last meal. He had fried chicken, mashed potatoes with gravy, and ice cream. And on Wednesday, February 28th, 2024, at 10 a.m., Thomas was strapped to a gurney and wheeled into the execution chamber. 3 medical team members tried unsuccessfully to establish an IV to carry the lethal concoction into Thomas's system. They attempted to start the IV lines in the now 73-year-old murderer's arms, legs, hands, and in his feet. At one point, one of the medical team members had to leave to go get new supplies.
My God. You should leave to go find another medical professional.
They were turning him into a human pincushion, basically. And after an hour of failed attempts, the warden halted the execution.
Because now they're paying overtime.
Thomas is now back on death row awaiting his fate, whatever that should entail.
Apparently a heart attack.
Well, they're apparently fighting the whole, they tried, they failed, he should get life. So,
Hey, did you hear about that one feller who died in prison and they brought him back, but he was trying to say that his sentence was over because he died?
yeah, I did hear that. I remember saying that.
Makes me think of that. You already tried once.
Yeah. Well, fun fact, in 2023, Idaho passed a law authorizing firing squad as a form of execution.
I did know that.
They can't use it yet because there's other laws and details that need to be figured out before they can actually utilize firing squad as execution.
I did know that they were seeking other ways to finish him off.
Yeah, your case gets into that next week, right?
Mm-hmm. Spoiler alert.
On a final sad note, Thomas and Carol's son that I told you about, Benjamin Allen Spaulding, I Googled him, I was curious. And sadly, his obituary pops up, and he had passed away at 46 years old on April 4th, 2022. He had 3 young children at the time of his unfortunate passing.
Was he a good citizen?
It looked like he was. There's all these pictures of him in like a music festival and playing instruments. And
well, I guess an obituary's not going to say, sure, glad to see this piece of shit off.
Yeah. Well, his kids, Sebastian, Serafina, and Emmanuel, they seem like they were
good people,
happy little kids with their daddy. But I thought that was sad that he passed away.
It's part of life.
Yeah.
At least he wasn't murdered.
That's true. But that is Thomas Eugene Creech and all his shenanigans. And I think it's crazy that officially he's only charged and like he's only convicted of 5 murders. I know that's still a lot, but if they connected him to 9, why I guess the way the states saw it is it wasn't worth the time and money of going through all of the things.
They just jot it down as most likely.
Yeah. But I think it's crazy. They're just like, he's already going to be put to death. And if not, he's going to be a lifer. So there's no purpose in pursuing this any further.
And if not, he's a pincushion.
Pretty much. I feel like that's torture. Have you ever had somebody try to draw your blood or start an IV and they just suck at their job? That shit hurts.
Knock on wood, but no.
I have. I had one when I was in labor with my second child. They blew the vein out in my hand because they put the IV in the back of my hand, but they didn't put it in right. So the second I moved my hand, it like tore through the vein. And the whole back of my hand had bruised. And because they were putting fluids in, my hand started swelling. My wrist swelled up. I'm already in labor. This doesn't feel any better.
It was a major pain thing. Like just, oh, we'll take away your pain here because, haha, distraction.
Turns out it did not distract. It just added. That's all I got.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the